Hi, everybody. It's John. It's the Record Shelf. We are in the album Van Halen, the debut album by the band Van Halen in 1978, and we are going to finish it up in this show. We've got 4 songs to cover, and this is a representation of, they're all representative of what Van Halen like was a band. They were unashamedly and unabashedly rock stars with a rock star mentality. They sang about being a rock star. They sang about being famous. They sang about the joys of being famous, and particularly when it came to the ladies. Van Halen was not shy about it. They put it in their songs. They use a lot of innuendo, but you know, back in those days we used innuendo. Today they just say it. But innuendo was all over the place, and Van Halen was the masters of innuendo in their songs. And so there's no point maybe describing what a lot of these songs are about, because it's pretty obvious. You just listen to it, you can tell what they're about. So I'm going to talk about the music, really, because Van Halen had an energy that was, at the time, really kind of second to none. And they, like I said, they didn't come into their songs with a little classical music and building up to something bigger. They just came in woof. And there were only a couple examples where they didn't do that, where they would start off with something light and build into it. Ice Cream Man is one example. There's a few others. But most of the time, Van Halen was just unabashedly in your face about rock and roll and about what they were singing about. And they were enjoying. Now they had made an album, and they were very popular at the time, just coming out, obviously living it up, living the lifestyle of being rock stars. And as we can see later in their career, it all began to affect them, particularly Eddie Van Halen, who was doing drugs, who was drinking, and, David Lee Roth's sexual escapades. We don't know too much about Alex and Michael Anthony, but I'm sure they were enjoying the lifestyle equally. Anyway, it did take a toll on the band. It took a toll on the band members, and they had a lot of problems and personnel situations in the late 80s and 90s and beyond. And then, of course, health issues, particularly with Eddie, who died just not that long ago. And so because of his health issues, a lot of it caused by his heavy smoking, drinking, partying. Let's be honest, folks. It's a miracle they all didn't die of the clap. I mean, that's really where they probably should have gone. But nevertheless, this band was a powerhouse party Southern California energy rock band, and they took off after this album. They took off like fire. They were everywhere, and Van Halen was one of the great rock bands of classic rock from the 70s and 80s, and you just can't deny it. Now this song here, the next one is "Feel Your Love Tonight," and it starts out with a great riff, and the drums coming in, playing the offbeat, the bump, 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 and then it comes, they all coming together, bump, 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 bump. Once again, their pompous brashness is what was their signature, and Eddie's guitar playing being their signature as well. And they enjoyed being that kind of band. In fact, a lot of 80s bands, as I mentioned before, got their cue from Van Halen. So let's go ahead and listen to Feel Your Love Tonight from 1978, remastered in 2011. And let's see if we can get this thing going right now.
So I
You know, folks, there's only one thing that Mark and I like almost as much as drumming, and that is good coffee. And so here at Rock My Bean, we have put together 5 of our favorite coffees from around the world that are roasted fresh on order and mailed to you right away. If you're interested in helping autism awareness, every purchase of this coffee, a percentage goes to the National Autistic Association to help autistic parents, help young people, help autistic adults. And we take this very seriously. Now, we have put together these 5 flavors. Each one is named after a specific drum from a specific part of the world. And we'll be expanding this line of coffees as we go. But these 5 are our favorites, and we want to share them with you. So if you're interested in drumming and coffee and helping with autistic awareness, please visit us at brainygourmet.com. Click on the Rock My Bean link, and happy coffee drinking. Rock and roll, folks. Rock and roll. I can't wait to feel your love tonight. That I think we know what that song's about. So I just want to tell you about the music, okay? Eddie could write great guitar riffs, and this was just one of them. I mean, it's just dun 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 dun. I mean, it's a great riff. It's a great hard rock riff. These guys were arena rock bands, okay? And they just played to larger and larger audiences, and they everybody could dig it, you know? They weren't singing about politics or the nature of man or anything like, no science fiction stories. It was just in your face rock and roll, and they sang about things that, you know, young men and women were thinking about. And anyway, Eddie's guitar here was just fantastic. He stuck with the riff the whole time because it was a riff-driven song, and there was those good background harmonies they came in with. Michael Anthony and Eddie and David Lee Roth singing some of those harmonies there. So that main chorus with the riff, that was the song. And it's just a great rock song. It's rock and roll. Now, if I was to give, say, someone from young people from today and say, if you want to experience 1970s to mid 80s rock and roll, if you want to understand the rock and roll mindset and sound, this is the song, this is the album, I would give anybody and say, here's rock and roll. This is, if you listen to this, you will get the main parts of it. You'll understand what it was really all about. Because while there was a lot of progressive bands out there and punk bands and stuff, I think Van Halen epitomized rock stardom and rock music as it became in the 70s and early 80s that we all kind of grew up with. This is it. This is a great representation. You can't go wrong. If you hear this, you will get it. Okay. The next song is Little Dreamer. This has a great beat to it. I like playing it as a drummer. I think it's a blast to play. I like playing all these songs, but this one is just got a dun, 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 dun. It's got a great bluesy feel to it. Now, I said earlier in last video that there wasn't a lot of blues introduced with Van Halen. By this time, they were trying to kind of moving beyond the boogie woogie and the blues. But this song has it, and they do a really good job of it. Once again, it starts it with a great riff by Eddie, and the drums come in, and Anthony's bass guitar lock in that beat, and you just get it right from the beginning. You get that vibe right from the start. So here we go with Little Dreamer, and right now.
About you cold when you were headed for the skies, but you were young and bold, and baby, didn't that change with a wink of your eye? Now no one's talking about those crazy days gone by. No one talks about the times you cried. A little dreamer, least likely to succeed. I had to tell them, baby, you were armed with all you need. Seems no one's talking about those crazy days gone past. Weren't they amazed when you were fearless? You are the little dreamer. You were the little dreamer. Yeah, yeah, they talked about you cold when you were headed for the skies. But you were young and bold, and maybe didn't that change with a wink of your eye? Seems no one's talking about the crazy days gone past. Weren't they amazed when you were pitiless? You are the little dreamer. Little dreamer, yeah. Oh, yeah. Little dreamer. Little dreamer.
Nice fade out with the cymbals. Very good. Nice fade out with the cymbals there for Alex's cymbals. So, okay, I think this is what I think the song is really about. I think that it's about, when I was a kid, I was a little dreamer. I was kind of doing my thing. I wasn't paying attention and focusing on what I was doing, going to school and learning my lessons and stuff. I was dreaming about being a famous musician or dreaming about someone much more important and successful than I am, or what the school or the institution or whatever society wanted me to be. And so when I finally got there, it's like, hey, remember me, the little dreamer? Yeah, well, I'm sitting on top of the world now. So I think that's kind of what the song is about. Little vindictiveness in there about some of these guys who actually probably, he just wants to be a rock musician. They just wrote him off. But people like Eddie, they succeeded, and probably against all the odds, because believe me, it is not easy to become a successful musician in the 70s and 80s. You had to be really good, and you had to be lucky, very, very, very lucky. Talent and skill was not enough to get you there. You had to be lucky. Because a lot of guys I know who are great musicians never became famous, never became like Van Halen, or even a little bit like Van Halen. They struggled to make it happen. They worked hard, but got nowhere. That we had fun doing it, but it didn't really go anywhere. It didn't equal a career or fame or anything. And so this little dreamer, it worked out for him against all odds. So good song here. It takes you away from that fast driving song we just heard earlier, slows it down a little bit. It's a great bluesy song, even though it's played like a 4-on-the-floor rock song. And I like it because I like playing that beat. It gives me room for some interesting fills and runs that you don't necessarily get with a nice standard kind of song. So I like that beat, that smoky, bluesy, sultry beat, which this song had. Great stuff from Eddie Van Halen. Great stuff from Michael Anthony and Alex playing the rhythms here. And of course, you can't leave David Lee Roth out. He did a great job singing this. And he kind of reminds me a little bit, because right now I'm also reviewing the album Bad Company. But he reminds me of Paul Rodgers a little bit in that sort of smoky, sensual voice. He wasn't a great singer. I think Paul Rodgers was a little better, but neither of them were known as great singers, like Steve Perry and Freddie Mercury and stuff. But they were good at what they did for the music that they sang, and they communicated that the feeling and emotion and sultriness and smokiness and sensualness. They communicated that very well with their voice. Okay. We're going to go on to the next song here, and this is one of my favorites from the album. It's called Ice Cream Man, and I love playing the drums to this one. It starts out with an acoustic guitar and David Lee Roth singing, and David Lee Roth was playing the acoustic here. He actually did this himself. He was singing this song before he was in Van Halen, so he was doing this on his own. So they brought it into this album, and it became a very memorable song on the album, Ice Cream Man. Now, once again, it's about libido. It's an innuendo about libido. Very clever use of innuendo to get across what they're talking about. It doesn't take a great imagination to figure he ain't talking about vanilla and chocolate ice cream. Okay, he's not talking about the guy in the little truck that has the music going by your street. That's not what he's talking about. But we all kind of get that, okay? And it's actually an old song from way back. And David Lee Roth liked it, and he used to sing it because he knew what he was singing about. And they put it on the album. So here we go with Ice Cream Man from Van Halen's debut album. And right now.
Dedicate one to the ladies. Sometimes your babe needs something to keep you cool. Now sometimes your babe needs something to keep you cool. Better look out now though, Dave's got something for you. Tell you what it is. I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by. Oh my, I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by. See now all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Hold on a second, baby. I gotta put my banana in Dixie cups. All flavors and push-ups too. I'm your ice cream man, baby. Stop me when I'm passing by. See now all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Hold on one more.
One more time.
Well, I'm usually passing by just about 11 o'clock. I never stop, I'm usually passing by just around 11 o'clock. And if you let me cool you one time, you'll be my regular style.
Here we go.
All right, boys. I gotta put my banana Dixie cups. All flavors and push-ups to under ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. See now all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Yes. I'm your ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. I'm your ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. They say all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. One time. Stop me when I'm passing by. I'm the ice cream man. Stop me when I'm passing by. They say all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. One time, boys. I'm your ice cream man. I'm your ice cream man. All my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy.
I love that song. That's a great song. I mean, that's a great song. I love playing that song. Great. It's got a great beat, a great riff, just a great vibe, and I love playing it in drums. Everybody likes it. Dun 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 dun. And of course, the vocalization by David Lee Roth is just outstanding. The way he does this sultry voice. He had that voice that he could do, that sultry, sensual voice, and that's what made him worked so well with Van Halen's music material because they were singing about those things, and his voice worked so well. And I love that end part. Satisfied. Very good, okay? Something Dave was, Diamond Dave, that's what they call him, Diamond Dave was just really, really good at, and he shined on this song for sure. Just a great song. Love it, love it. Fan favorite, too. Okay. Now, the last song on the album, the very last song on the album, is On Fire. And this song is about being a rock star, achieving success, getting where you finally wanted to go, and just taking over, which Van Halen did. They were the kings of the top of the rock acts for over a decade. And right up there with Journey and other bands that were huge in the 70s, especially in the 80s. But Van Halen was big in the late 70s too. But they were huge. They were one of the biggest acts in at least in the Western world. And you just couldn't do much bigger than Van Halen. They were huge. Even after Diamond Dave left and Sammy Hagar came in the 80s, they stayed at the top. Just a very hot act. And they were exactly what they said they were. They weren't anything more, anything less. They were exactly what they said they were. So this last song on this debut album is On Fire. Just a great way to end the album on a bang. Exactly the way they started it, they end it. So let's get into On Fire by Van Halen on their debut album. Here we go right now.
Turn your radios on. I'll appear right there. Yes, I will. Turn me up real loud. I'm in your house. Now making chin now, baby, as I ride your side. One time.
Wow. Okay, they are on fire, and they were on fire when this album came out. They were on fire. Okay. Once again, powerful way to end an album that started out powerful. It just blasted its way across, a good 45 minutes or so, and bang, it was over. This was their debut album. And believe me, after everybody heard this, they're like, these dudes are killer, okay? These dudes are fire. And this was in everybody's tape deck in their home. It was on their car stereo, and it was at parties. You put this on at the first song at the party, it plays all the way through to the end. You don't have to stop or change or put something else on. It was a party rock album. And I remember what a big deal this was in 1978 when it came out. And Van Halen put out another album right after that, Van Halen 2, and just one after another. And they just blasted their way through about a decade. Solid rock music. And this is how they started. And they really were not much different than this a decade later. They may have kind of done some more melodic stuff and kind of calmed down a little bit, but not much. They were a party, hard rock, Southern California, in-your-face energy, arena rock band. That's what they were. And in this song, you got everything. You got Eddie's great guitar playing, his little solos here and there, the way he tortured those strings and the guitar to get those incredible sounds. You had Alex, who was just a machine on the drums. I mean, he was a machine. This guy kept up with Eddie and gave that song the energy, because when Eddie would go off and play, they needed that energy, and both Michael Anthony and Alex Van Halen provided the machine, the pistons that were driving that thing at full velocity right through. And so Alex was a machine of a drummer, and we review him on Rock My Bean. You want to go back and look at a review I did of Alex. One of the top drummers of the 70s and 80s, rock drummers, definitely. He doesn't get the respect he deserves, but he was a machine of a drummer. Okay, and Michael Anthony's bass playing, believe me, Van Halen wouldn't be anything without Michael Anthony. He had a great high-end voice to do those harmonies. His bass playing was the thunder, boom, 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 behind it, locking in with Alex to carry the melody and that beat at the same time, because there was only one guitar player, and that was really just Eddie. And of course, David Lee Roth's great vocals in this. I mean, he got up there, got those high ends, fire. I mean, he was doing that too. It wasn't just Michael Anthony. So everybody just, on this album, they put forth their best face. They did everything at their top level for this song to end the album. And believe me, when this album was over, we were teenagers going, damn, these guys are just incredible. I can't wait to their next album. I'm gonna be playing this record till the grooves wear out. I'm gonna tear the tape in my tape deck. That's how much I'm gonna play this album over and over and over. And believe me, that's where it was in the summer of 78 and 79. This album and the next one were just off the charts successful. And Van Halen just went into the stratosphere as far as a successful rock band, arena rock band. And there have been a lot of copycats of Eddie Van Halen since Eddie, but he was the first. He was one of the greatest. And, there's some people trying to knock him down off his perch saying, well, there are other great guys out there too. Yes, but Eddie was one of the top of the mountain guitar players for classic rock. He has to be up there. Has to be. Because he revolutionized guitar playing, and they brought new energy to rock music, which was already kind of losing it because disco was coming out, and it needed some life. And bands like Boston and bands like Van Halen brought life back to a music style that was kind of drifting and kind of going off and breaking up. A lot of people were revolting against the stuff that happened, like these punk bands, like new wave bands, like the Cars and the Sex Pistols and Ramones and stuff, were revolting against that stuff. They wanted simpler rock music that was closer to the original idea of rock music. And Van Halen certainly was it. They were a different kind of punk band. They were the Southern California party sub-punk band, okay? So while they were doing the same kind of thing that the Cars were doing or the Ramones were doing, they were doing it a different way. They weren't minimalizing it and jumping it with a bunch of keyboards or just repeating the same chorus over and over again like a punk band. They were creating good songs, but they were doing it in a way that they brought the central idea of rock and roll back using what was at the time the new technology. And they did it with panache, they did it with power, they did it with energy. They did a masterpiece of rock and roll. If you want, like I said, if you want to give someone, a young person from today or from people a generation from now, and say, here is classic rock summed down into one song or one album. This is it right here. This is the one I would give them. Okay. Well, that's it. We have completed the album Van Halen, the debut album of the band Van Halen, 1978, and it's been a blast, okay? A blast from the past, but I realize how incredibly important these guys were. And when there was a lot of experimentation going on in the 80s, a lot of these strange new wave bands were coming out with, bringing back old styles of crooning music or 50s styles or coming up with something new. Van Halen carried the torch of rock music in its pure form. And that's what they did, and they continued to do it. And other bands like AC/DC did the same thing, a little differently, but they did the same thing. They kept it on an even keel. They carried it forward as far as they could. And even in the 90s and 2000s when, rock had pretty much withered away into nothing because of the disastrous, and I consider the disastrous 1990s version of rock and roll, and rap coming along and becoming the favorite of the music industry, they kept going. They kept going, and they kept the torch alive as long as they possibly could till they got too old or too feeble or whatever, or incapable of delivering anymore. And of course, with Death with Eddie, that was the end of Van Halen. And, of course, we have AC/DC is a different story altogether. We'll be getting to them soon. But they carried the torch as long as they could, and they did a great job. And this is, like I said, the epitome of rock and roll at its height. All right, folks, well, thanks for joining me on this magic carpet ride to the greatest rock albums of the 70s, 80s. Love having you with me. Really enjoying doing this, sharing my analysis of these great bands, great songs of a generation or two, mainly of the late baby boomers and early Gen X. This was our music, and it was a great period of time with fantastic music. And if you want to get into rock and roll, if you're from a younger generation, this is the stuff you want to be listening to. This is the lessons you want to learn. You want to go back to this period because this is the sauce right here, folks. All right. Thanks again. Please join us for the rest of the other album reviews. We've done a lot of album reviews, everything from Fleetwood Mac Rumors to Boston's debut album to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, as well as many others. We're going to cover all of the great rock albums of the 1970s and 1980s. This is John from the Record Shelf, thanking you for being with me, and keep rocking on.